This is A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and I'm here today with Tony Haggerty. Things have settled down a wee bit, Tony. It's been a rather hectic and enjoyable day. We've had guests in the studio, fellow podcasters of a Celtic persuasion. We've had guests dialing in. We've had pre-arranged, pre-recorded material that we've uploaded onto our channels. And all along that, there's a thread, and the thread is that we're raising money for the birthplace of Celtic, who are in dire need of our assistance. Why that wasn't kind of public knowledge is probably due to the fact, I think, Tony, that there's a great pride with a lot of people where they don't want to make it public because they think they'll deal with it, and that's fine. So, St Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic, we know the fairy tale. I spoke to Tony Curran, it was on the interview earlier on today. Celtic's story is like a fairy tale. The words were uttered by Billy McNeill. Yeah, there's a fairy tale element about this club. I fell in love with Celtic. I would say Celtic are an omnipresence in my life. They're always there, right? So when you think of things like when you're growing up, your point of reference whereby, you know, when I was growing up, somebody like George Michael or Madonna or Michael Jackson were always just there. You mentioned Elton John earlier. They were always just there. They were always on top of the pops, and they existed. They were omnipresent. And Adam and the Ants, of course, which was my first record. And Celtic were omnipresent. And I remember, as a young kid, never having decided I'm going to be a Celtic fan. It was basically, it was part of your weekly ritual that your dad, in my dad's case, he was a miner. He worked in the pits, and he worked all week, Tony, and at the weekend, he went to the Celtic game, and that was it. I mean, there was no argument. That's what happened. Home and away. It's only now, you know, looking back, how I appreciate the travelling he did as well. I'm looking at some of these tickets that make up the collage behind the ACSOM screens, and he was at so many games, you know, European games, the Rapid Vienna fiasco, and going down to Old Trafford and Nottingham Forest, and he used to follow Scotland as well. But I always remember, and I have told this story a couple of times, but it is my kind of earliest Celtic memory, whereby there was a buzz about the place, to coin a phrase, in our house. And at that time, and I know it was the early 80s because my wee sister was a baby. She was born in 82, so I know it's 82, 83, right? And my dad is getting ready to go to the football. And you know that it's the weekend because you're not at school or nursery or whatever. And as I say, there's a atmosphere. I'm not going to say a tension, but it's palpable. Something's happening, right? And that something is that your old man's getting ready to go to the game. A busload of people are going to come and pick him up. And that busload, I'm talking cousins, uncles, friends, etc., all coming to pick him up. And this is like guys from the West Five villages, Oakley, Blair Hall, High Valleyfield, that kind of demographic. That's the kind of the crew, the squad that would be going with my old man. And then my dad would go. And I mean, it was no like the 50s and 60s where guys would go with their suits and their overcoats and their hats and all that. But they got ready to go to the game, right? And obviously spent all morning getting ready to get picked up. But it was double denim and Adidas Sambas, mate. That was a uniform, right? But the old Celtic bar scarf.
Yeah.
Right? Which basically, you know, lasted forever. It was the scarf that, you know...
Well, had like patches, Celtic Ace of Clubs and all that kind of stuff.
All that kind of
stuff, yeah.
There was on the patches and badges, there was always Celtic OK.
Yeah, Celtic OK.
That was a statement,
yeah.
And then there was 10 men winning the league and Feed the Bear and all this kind of stuff. European Cup ones and all that. And it was a big occasion. Every single time it came, it was a big occasion. And then obviously he would disappear, and sometimes you would look at the living room window and the vehicle comes up. And I'm talking a motley crew, Tony. An absolute motley crew. And I know for a fact that at least one of them listens to and watches this show, because it's the guy that took me to my first game, my Uncle Chick. And I always tell that story, obviously, about, you know, firstborn child's called Kenny after Dalglish. Then you've got Danny McGrain. What are you going to call the girl? Or Claire after Brian McClare. So, you know, steeped in Celtic, absolutely steeped. But you didn't really know where they're going, what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. And then your dad, who goes away like a wee shiny penny, comes back several hours later in a kind of like different state, because, and there's a smell, and it's a combination of tobacco, cigarette smoke, bevy, Wrigley's chewing gum to try and hide it, as if a packet of that's going to hide the fact that you're half cut, And he would come back, and I always remember it was like this routine. In the inside pocket of the denim jacket came a programme, which was then put on a round glass table that sat in our living room area. And that wasn't for me, actually, because one of my big cousins collected programmes at the time. I always remember like looking at it and seeing the crest and all the rest of it. But we were kind of like waiting on him coming back, and the dinner was getting made and the scores were coming through. The results were coming through. 82, so we would have had 4 channels back then, aye? Channel 4 was launched in 82, wasn't it?
82, yeah.
And I always remember the buzz around Charlie Nicholas about that time as well.
Yeah.
I do remember that, Charlie scoring and hat-tricks and all that. And there was just, it didn't matter that he'd been away with his mates and probably couldn't remember much of the action. But it was a release because of the working, that's what football was at that time, Tony. It was a release for the working class. Yeah. And let's say the working class man, because I mean, that in itself was mainly a kind of male-orientated endeavour at the weekend. And the mothers, like my mum, would be watching the 4 kids. And that, for me, was my ambition. I want to be like my old man. I want to go to these Celtic games and drink beer and smoke cigarettes and all that, That was my ambition. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I annoyed them. The football bit, no the fags and the drink. I annoyed them for years to go. But of course, with the miners' strike and then my dad having to find work elsewhere and having to work abroad and all that, there was a period of time where it wasn't possible to go and watch Celtic geographically or financially or whatever. And it was only in 1987 that I started going. So at that point, I'm 8 years of age. And Billy McNeil's a manager. So when we talk about the fairy tale, that's intrinsically linked to me falling in love with Celtic in the centenary, having had this omnipresent kind of like impression on me since year dot.
Kevin Graham talks about being a romantic. Every Celtic supporter's a romantic. They're seduced by the badge, they're seduced by the colours, they're seduced by the history, which is handed down from generation to generation. I decided to be a Celtic supporter when my dad took me to Shawfield to watch Craig Brown's Clyde, 1976-77. And Clyde Shawfield Stadium is close proximity to Celtic Park. I wrote it in the book, and we used to have a ritual. He'd give me my pocket money. We'd go to East Kilbride Town Centre. I'd buy a Matchbox car, a dinky car, corgi car, right? And I'd be...
And that's remained with you as well, the love of the corgi.
And the running them along the wooden stands, because Craig Brown's team didn't exactly pack them in. And I'm watching the game, and my dad would say to me, and I'd run the car along, and he'd say, "You're not watching the football?" And I'm saying, "Do you think Kenny Dalglish has scored for Celtic? Do you think Celtic are winning, Dad?" Then you'd hear a roar coming from Parkhead. And I remember being at a particular Clyde game. We were there for the first half. The second half we were at Celtic Park. And I said it in the book as a phrase. I said it was like going from watching football on a black and white portable TV to glorious Technicolor. And when I sat down at Celtic Park, which I always sat in the main stand, when I was a kid, so I'd be seeing 76, 77, so I'd be 4 or 5. And I just knew, you were home. And it was like that pivotal moment, that kind of romantic moment that you have with your dad. It's a father-son thing. My brother was there with us as well, so the 3 of us would, and he just kind of looked as if, yeah. And in that moment, you get your dad saying, "I've done my job." They will grow up Celtic fans, and you're just sitting there. For me, the biggest thrill for me was to be in the same building as Kenny Dalglish, King Kenny. Just absolutely mesmerised by the football that Kenny Dalglish was. And as I say, I got the tail end of that 76-77 season, and he leaves. And I didn't think it was possible for your heart to be broken over a game of football, but I was crestfallen. And my dad says to me that he never understood the adage of one man doesn't make a team, but it did, because in the season that followed, so I think Rangers won the treble, 78, Jock Wilson, you know, and then obviously, but it was Nick Hornby that said in Fever Pitch, for every football supporter, your life's not defined in years, it's defined in seasons. See, when your football club enters your skin and gets under your skin, you can pick moments. You can pick a year of your Celtic supporting life, and you will pick out any game or any particular high or moment that you shared with your dad, your granddad, your cousins, your uncles, your friends. You can pick any season, and for me, it's from 76 onwards. Throw me a number and I'll tell you about a game, because it's ingrained in you. It's now, you talk about that's your foundation, going back to St Mary's, the foundation of the club.
Yep.
But it's your foundation of being a Celtic supporter. You know, I've said before, it's kind of indescribable. Every person, every Celtic fan would describe it differently. But there's no feeling like it for every Celtic fan. Other clubs can say the same thing. I can't speak for other clubs because I don't support other clubs. And I've also written in the book that you can only support one football club. You can only support one football club.
I agree.
To say you support another club, it's a tantamount to football criminality. You can like other football clubs.
Yes.
You can have an affinity for whatever reason. I like St Mirren because they were the first club I covered as a journalist, as a working journalist. But I don't get upset if they get beat. I have a fondness for them because
that's the difference.
Right?
Yep.
I like, everybody loved Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, but did they cry when they lost? Don't think so. You know, see, when your team, you have, your team is your team, whether it be Celtic, whether it be Albion Rovers, Cowdenbeath, it doesn't matter. See, once you're chosen your team, that's it. It's your badge of honour, it's your flag, it's your scarf, it's your patches, it's your tablets, macaroon, chewing gum, the chews, you know, it's your hat, scarf, badges and tapes. These are all, it's your memories, and it's, for you, it's 87 onwards. For me, it's 76 onwards. 76, 77, kind of, and we move from there, you know, and you pick out, you see that collage of tickets. I'm always drawn to the Nottingham Forest one, you know, and I can picture that vividly. I remember everything about it, home and away, you know, and it's like they're Rolodex in your mind, or, as I prefer to say, for those of an older generation, they're Polaroids in your mind, where you push a button in your brain and out pops the photograph. You can visualise it, you can verbalise it. Somebody says to you, City Ground 83, talk about it. Rapid Vienna 84, for you it's any game in the centenary season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Joe Miller's Tannadice goal in the last minute to win 2-1 in Boxing Day 87. I never saw the ball strike the net because there was such a big surge. Chris Morris crossed it. The rest is in the ether, and it's never been shown on TV because I've never seen it. But I do know it hit the net because all the fans went bananas. And, you know, things like that. But I can visualise that. I can vision the cross coming over, and then it's like the telly going blank. It's just like, and then all of a sudden, Bedlam. Yeah. Right? That centenary team were notorious for scoring late goals.
Oh, I know.
And talk about that fairy tale. And today's part of that fairy tale about St Mary's.
It is.
Keep that fairy tale going. I said a few words earlier, which I put onto the group chat, and you felt different about today's Charity Weekender. There was a motivation, a real will within you as a Celtic supporter to raise as much money for this, for that fairy tale element, and for what Tommy Byrne said was a commitment and a cause. You felt that today. Your heart kind of swelled with pride actually about that you are playing a small part in doing something good for a commitment and a cause. And that's why I say it strikes a chord with every Celtic supporter. It should, and it would, and it does. And that's the testament to that is the money that's been raised so far.
Oh, yeah. I mean, see, I look back on the fundraiser last year, Tony, and the 4 charities that benefited from it. and we felt that mental health had to, a mental health charity had to benefit from it. And it did. And that was, brought even more to the forefront during the pandemic, because a lot of people suffered even more, because, often it's a daily struggle in any case, but then you take away a lot of the coping mechanisms during a pandemic, and it becomes even more difficult for them. And then we had Children's First, so we're looking at, vulnerable kids who might wake up on Christmas morning with no presents under the tree. So that was important. The homeless charity, and I know, homelessness is something close to your heart, Tony. So there was absolutely, no way that we could possibly do something and not give funds to the homeless as well. And I just think that the last one at this stage last year was the food bank. And again, it's something that it should never be normal. The food banks are now part of day-to-day life, and it should never be like that. And I just think that's a measure of the people who are in charge of the country, that they've allowed that situation to develop to that point. But this year, I just think the worlds have aligned to a degree. So the passing of an absolute great in Bertie Auld. And I've got to say that some of the items we have for auction are Bertie Auld items. So we do have a number of signed jerseys and canvases that have been signed by Bertie, and we'll be giving them as part of the auction. We'll be putting them in so that people can raise even more funds following the Weekender. And they were gifted to us by the penalty spot, Kevin Tate at Sword Street in Glasgow, who simply wanted to help the cause, people in a cause. That's what Tony, that's what you were saying earlier on, Tony. And I think that this year, Bertie's funeral, Bertie was not of the Catholic faith, but it happened at St Mary's. And I think that when you speak to the canon down there, and he explains that kind of thing might be an issue when you look at the politics within the Catholic Church. He didn't care. It was happening, and that was it. It was going to happen because that was the right thing to do, and that's what Bertie wanted, right? So the only thing that Bertie wasn't a Catholic was, and because he had the faith. He had the faith, Tony. He just wasn't a Catholic. But that didn't matter. And it went ahead, and it brought it back to light, and it brought it back to the forefront in my mind and other Celtic fans' minds that, this is a place that we cannot forget. We cannot forget this place in the heart of Celtic's history. And I brought up, and I've left it deliberately on the screen, a comment from McGrory. Now, McGrory has been involved in commenting on a Celtic State of Mind over the last 12 months plus. So thank you for your ongoing support. And he says via YouTube, instead of these great fundraisers, Celtic should pledge to always upkeep our birthplace. Tell us your thoughts in the comments section about that. If there's anything else you want to discuss or any questions you want to ask Tony and I, then please do so, because, we are here to talk football, to talk Celtic, traditions, history, memories, heritage. And it's when I'm at my happiest, chatting away about Celtic. It's strange because it becomes an obsession. It keeps up on you without you even realising. It's a temptress, you know what I mean? It trips you up when you least expect it, but it raises you to extraordinary heights that few things can raise you to. There was a thing there you were talking about, that moment before the rapturous applause. There is a moment, it goes quiet for a millisecond, and then it explodes. Yeah. And when I think back to like my dad and his generation of guys going, they had proper difficult jobs, Tony. I mean, the conditions that, and I never ever went. I know that there used to be open days, but I was never really interested in going. I never went down a pit, but I've been to the Mining Museum in Newton Grange, and just to get an insight of the conditions, Tony, the conditions that these guys were working in, 12-hour shifts up to their neck in water, and because my dad was a mechanical engineer, and a lot of it was pumping water out of pits because there was floods. And, then coming home and having to scrub the soot out of your hair and everything else. So that weekend was your release. And the drudgery of day-to-day life, back then. It's quite depressing to look back, you know. It was quite dark and dingy, the lifestyles that these people led, Tony. So the football, in that moment we spoke about, that second just before the rapturous applause, that emotion, they probably didn't get that at any other point or anywhere else in their lives.
Yeah.
That was the escapism, wasn't it?
Of course it was escapism, and that's what every romantic thought entered their head. But the football team and their wishes for the club, and you know, and the fact that they had a vehicle, i.e. Celtic, I said earlier, to have that primal scream, that sense of belonging. You belong to something big, something that mattered, something that you cared deeply and passionately about. No other thing in a lot of Celtic supporters' existence cuts them like a knife, like Celtic does. You know, and I'm talking about relationships as well, you know, and I'm just talking about, you know, it's, you said there, it's a constant. Once you decide Celtic is your team, it's a constant. And that's why, you know, you talk about Bertie Auld, and I said it on the pod the other day, you saw guys like Bertie Auld, you see the Lions as the eternal flame, don't you? It never goes out. You know, you spoke earlier, you said Jock Stein built Celtic into the entity that they've become, that football team, that band of men. I never saw that team. Through the job that I do and the privileged position that being a football journalist allows, I got to become friends with them. These were guys that my dad watched, hero worshipped. You know, I've told the story before about and introduced them to Bobby Murdoch, Bertie Auld and Jimmy Johnston, and having that emotional moment myself, thinking, you know, if I do nothing else in my career, you know, I did that, had that moment, and you know, things like that make you well up, because it's about your love for the football club and personalities that play for that football club, and just what it means to you as a person. You know, you invest so much of your time and emotion in Celtic Football Club. You know, you can try and deny that, but you do. And if you're lucky to be with a partner, you just hope that they understand that, because it will drive you around the twist. It drive you to distraction, moments of real highs, joy, despair, call it what you like, but it's just your investment in football as a game altogether. But when you like football, you have to choose a team. You know, people say you don't choose Celtic, Celtic chooses you. Maybe so. But once that choice is made, that there is no going back from that, and you're in through thick and thin, and mostly all or nearly all of your memories, mine's personally, involve football and involve Celtic. You know, and it could be a one-dimensional life. And I want to state right now, I'm married to a partner called Caroline, and I love her to bits, and thankfully she gets my devotion, obsession with football and Celtic, and I'm lucky to have that, and I'm lucky to do what I do. I shared a few stories earlier as well. I'm quite kind of self-deprecating about it all too, because I'm not writing Pulitzer Prize winning stuff. I am in my head, you know, but I treat it with the reverence and respect it deserves, because I know a lot of people would like to swap positions. You talk about your father and my father with the daily drudgery. I'm very aware of that, and I'm one of those fortunate people in life who's doing something that he loves, absolutely adores, talking about the club that he loves and adores. And I just hope that when I write, that comes through in my writing. Hope when I speak, it comes through in my speech when I talk about, you know, Celtic Football Club. And I you know, and it's an emotional thing. Days like today, I say that it does get you, it grips you emotionally, because you know that the money you help raise it's going to something that you care so much about. You question why it should be allowed to get to this particular point, but I said earlier, this will ensure that St Mary's never becomes a paradise lost. It will never become a paradise lost as long as our Celtic supporters like yourself, myself, all the podcasters, and all the people that have donated to the Charity Weekender today. They will not allow that to happen. You can call them, and you used a word, probably the roots of all of them, or nearly all of them, will be in working class, I would have thought.
See, the thing, Tony, right? You and I are talking about it, similarly, and there's so many people with a similar tale where Celtic was there, and it was always there, just like Tommy Burns said, that we were there and we're always there. Celtic's always there for us. It's not something that you pick up whenever you fancy. It's constantly there. But we spoke in the last show when Declan McConville was involved in the chat, and we spoke about people who had chosen Celtic. We talk about the guys of high profile, the artists of high profile, like Bob Marley, for example. He chose Celtic. There was a reason he chose Celtic, and I think a big part of that. And we spoke about the trio of Brother Wilfred and Jock Stein and Fergus McCann and what they did for the club. And you look at what Stein did for Celtic. He made the club renowned. You look at the success or lack of success prior to, in the years leading to, rather, Jock Stein taking over as a manager. And I know we had great sides in the past, the 6-in-a-row team. Very few people in the comment section, and I'm not besmirching any Celtic fans' knowledge, but very few of them could tell me who the 6-in-a-row team were. Very few of them could tell me the years of the 6-in-a-row league. And that, by the way, that's just because it was so long ago. Yeah. You go through, the 1940s, the 1950s, and the lack of success that Celtic had. Fleeting successes like a 7-1 cup win over Rangers, a Coronation Cup win, a double in 53-54. But we had gone 8 years with no trophies when Jock Stein won his first trophy as Celtic's manager in 1965. Then it was a period of utter dominance, but not just in Scotland. We became a European superpower. And people think, or they often look at that European Cup win, and I say people, I'm talking about the uninitiated. I'm talking about the ones who look down their nose at Scottish football then and now. It wasn't an anomaly because, and I've said this a few times on the podcast, you look at the 12 years from 1964, that was pre-Stein, to 1976. And in 9 of those seasons, in 9 out of those 12 seasons, Tony, Celtic reached at least the quarter-final stage of European competition 9 times. Yeah. 9 out of 12. Now, if a team was to do that just now, they would be a European superpower. They'd be buying players for £100 million on a whim. And Jock Stein did it with a philosophy that, as we spoke about before, unlocked the Catenaccio, which is the door bolt, the ultra-defensive Italian system that was played. And I love, again, this is the romantic in us, and it's something Declan spoke about a few weeks ago. I love the fact that you bring it right up to the Ange Postecoglou era, where he's talking about his dad and his dad's disdain for Italian football and how boring it was and defensive. And then you look at the Hungarian influence on Ange Postecoglou with Ferenc Puskás. And then you look at the Hungarian influence on Jock Stein. Listen, I'm not trying to compare the two guys as managers. Ange Postecoglou's a few months in the job. But I'm talking about the influence and how they've built their footballing philosophies. Yeah. And Stein did that. And he one of his prized possessions, and this was written about in Archie Macpherson's absolutely tremendous biography of the man, was a film of the Hungarian team dismantling England. And he watched it, and he was creating systems on his own mind as to how did the Hungarians do that.
Was that at Wembley or over there? Because they won 6-8 at Wembley, then beat them 7-1 in Hungary.
It was the Wembley. Yeah. It was the Wembley game.
The Wembley one was shown and would be shown on TV, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Jock Stein nailed it, right? You talk that's when the fairy tale element kicks in, right? But Stein nailed it because proudest that Jock Stein was about that whole era and about Lisbon was the comment that he made. We did it playing pure, beautiful, inventive football. That pleased him more than anything. Celtic did that, right? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. What Celtic, the game and the philosophy and the style that Celtic played in Lisbon was the precursor to total football. Because who was the next
The next wave?
The next wave was Dutch football.
Yep.
Dutch football took Stein's dismantling of Inter Milan and moved it on a bit with the whole concept of total football. You could argue that Lisbon performance was total football in all but name. But as you say, Stein studied that. Excuse me. I think they also studied Real Madrid's dismantling of Eintracht Frankfurt in 1960 at Hampden. Games like that where you could attack, score goals, entertain. You look at the Lisbon final, it's the most one-sided 2-1 doing you've ever seen in your puff. And it's no surprise that Andy's influenced by Puskas. Because if you've ever watched that footage of the 1960 Real Madrid Eintracht Frankfurt game, Puskas and Di Stefano destroy Eintracht Frankfurt, who had destroyed Rangers in the semi-final, a right good Rangers team. And, so these were people who wanted to entertain, score goals, do what football's all about. Italians were pretty anti-football, but were effective at it, and it was a real watershed moment in kind of football terms. Celtic beating Inter Milan, like Celtic not being a European superpower. You had Benfica before that, and you had Real Madrid playing that way, who dominated the first five. With that brilliant team with Del Sol, Santa Maria, Di Stefano, Puskas, all these guys, But when Celtic came along, the problem with these teams is that they suffer from a lack of audience because nobody really got to see it. Mm-hmm. And then when Celtic came along, the BBC World Service showed it and Scottish Television showed it. So it was beamed to a large audience. So this was kind of a monumental football match in a lot of people's lives. And then when they found out Celtic spin the globe, they're from that wee tiny corner of the globe. And they're like, nah. And then you narrow that down and say, well, actually, all the players came from that specific radius. And it was McIlvanney that coined the phrase, they won the European Cup with a Glasgow District 11. Right? You talk about fairy tales.
I know.
Romantics. I said the other week, guys that had spun round clothes poles, had jumped across bins, played with spherical objects, not necessarily footballs, and housing schemes, just anything that they could roll into a ball shape, had done a number on the catwalk kings of Europe, European football sophisticates. That as an achievement is romantic in itself. It's immeasurable. And I talk about a team that I've never seen in my life. I say I'm privileged to meet some of the players latterly in my life, and I love that. I could listen to them all day. My dad will say to my dad, you were spoiled. You grew up, saw that team. Your dad will have seen that team, And that made every working class man that went to football and Celtic supporter, it's the proudest achievement ever. It's still the proudest achievement ever. It's still the beginning of the fairy tale.
But see, talking about achievement and fairy tale, and then you merge that into the drudgery and, the societal problems that existed to the working classes at that time, Tony, it's the perfect combination.
Of course. Because
when you're at the game and you have that unbridled joy and you probably behave in a way in the stadium, and I don't mean disobedient and badly and getting in trouble, you probably behave in a way that, you're not able to behave like that because you've got a wife and a family to feed and you've got a job to go to and etc. But then you go into this football stadium, this cauldron or this theatre, and when, you've got this community of people, with a common goal.
Standing with you.
Standing with you. And I always remember that. And this is something, again, that, I think about me going to the game for the first time, 1987, Tommy Burns' testimonial against Liverpool. And it was only 20 years after. It was only 20 years after Celtic won the European Cup. And I sometimes think back to, right, what was happening 20 years ago just now? Well, Martin O'Neill was in charge. He came in and he won a treble. And that frightens me a bit, because my point of reference to the O'Neill years, I remember all the games, every single game. But I look at the centenary year in Lisbon as being two different ages. Lisbon's a million years before the centenary season, in my mind, Tony, because I wasn't born when we won in Lisbon. You know what I mean? So my point of reference is a wee bit skewed when I'm looking down the history there. And I look at Celtic, for me, I am disappointed when we lose. And it does affect you on an emotional level. And that's why I agree with you that we could never support another team. You can admire certain aspects of football teams. And I think that's why there is this kind of joint respect, if you like, between Celtic fans and fans of St. Pauli. When you look at the makeup and the culture and the politics of the fan base and the ultras over there. And I think they've played a big part in shaping the look and the sound of the Green Brigade. I remember going to St. Pauli. I decided I was intoxicated by the whole story, the whole ultras thing. I thought it was unbelievable, and I was trying to do some research through the links that Celtic fans had with the St. Pauli fans, late 80s, early 90s. Why would a group of Celtic fans watching Celtic in Germany end up down at the Reeperbahn? I have no idea, but they did. And then they come across this pub called the Jolly Roger. This is a punk football team, Tony. It really is. I mean, you've just got to look at somebody like Richard Jobson, frontman of the Skids, fellow Fifer. On stage, he's an old punk, and he's wearing the St. Pauli t-shirt. It's the archetypal punk t-shirt, the skull and crossbones. And I've totally fell in love with that whole idea. So I started researching it and going over there, and never ever got around to writing the book, as it happens. But the research was good fun. But I was retracing the steps of Celtic fans that had gone before me. I wasn't the guy that came up with the idea, Tony, that this was a club that I would, undoubtedly have an infinity. The reason I knew about it is because I read it in the pages in Not the View. And then I started going to the games, and I could hear these chants. But there were chants that Celtic had nabbed from St. Pauli. And it grew, and the myth grew, and the mythology grew, to the point where I'm like, I need to go and see and feel and hear this for myself. So there are clubs out there, but I guess it's a long-winded way of me asking you the question. So we never chose our football club. People like Bob Marley did, and he chose Celtic. People like Roger Waters watches the display for Palestine that the Green Brigade put on, and he falls in love with that, the ethos of the Celtic support, to such a degree that he tours the world with that as his backdrop. These people choose Celtic. And I think that if you were to land in Scotland for any reason, what I was saying earlier with my old man working all over Europe, if that was the case and you ended up by default in Scotland, you would choose Celtic. If it was a choice, you would choose them. If you had no knowledge of Scottish football, you said, right, give me the big book. Let's have a wee read of the history.
Yeah, I think if you like to think that most people would choose Celtic, again, Barcelona motto, more than a club and all that, and you're finding that out today. There's just something about Celtic that it's inexplicable, but it's even more inexplicable to outsiders who choose Celtic as to why they do it, but they have their reasons. So as you say, if they research it, they fall in love with the fairy tale, they fall in love with the backstory, the back catalogue, the history. If you're of a certain age, you will remember certain things in Celtic's history, like winning the European Cup, like the centenary team, the Martin O'Neill team, to bring it right up to as close to up to date as possible. That kind of reference points.
Yep.
So they'll have a reason. Guys like Bob Marley, you shake your head, don't you, in disbelief, and you just think that's wonderful, and you do think, you're the album Legend, and you do think you're a legend, and you supported Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
You came from Jamaica. I mean, it's just like you can't square the circle on that, and you probably don't want to, because in your mind you just think, you know what, it's great. You get latterly fans we spoke of here, like Snoop Dogg or Snoop Lion, as they say, coming out and saying they would invest in Celtic. But you see, so someone somewhere along the line has said to him, you want to support them, or he's researched it, like you researched Sam Powley, and all of a sudden, yep, my allegiance is there. And it's more often than not the case that, famous people, celebrities, call them what you will, they come down on the side of Celtic. That's no coincidence, is it?
No. You just know Martin Scorsese's a Celtic fan. You know what I mean? Thank you, everybody, for commenting. I think what we're going to do is we're going to dedicate some time here for the next half hour. You're pulling some comments up, Tony, because, I mean, when you think about it, these are the people who are supporting ACSOM every day. Every day. And also they're supporting the fundraiser by putting their hands in their pockets. And I always work from the premise of, a lot giving a little. If everybody gives a little, that's basically where we go. But we've had some unbelievable amounts being donated as well, which is just frightening. It's humbling. It's humbling.
It is humbling. So it's just humbling to be a part of it all, to be honest. So.
It is. Now, the last time we were on, you, myself, and Declan, we smashed through the 16 grand barrier, I think. We're up at 16,520. So it's actually looking like we might get to about 17,000. Even saying that, 17 grand. Might happen by the end of the night. We've got one more show after Tony and I finish up here, and it's the Unrestricted View, which is a Celtic podcast that is fairly new. So really, you've had quite a lot of established pods on, and it's important to introduce you to some of the new boys on the block, and they certainly are that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them. But I want to pull some of your comments in. So let's have a wee look at some of them. And McGrory again, I mean, here you go. There's a double for you, McGrory. And in your case, it was Greenock Shipyards, then Paradise. There's so many stories like that. Shipyards and dockyards and pits. And, it would have been like a shining light at the end of your week, Tony. I mean, you imagine that. Those kinds of work. But as well as the work, and I still talk to my dad about it, thankfully. I still got my parents, and I still talk to my old man about it, and I ask him, how on earth were you able to put up with the manual labour for a kickoff? Because, I think I got a paper cut once, which was tragic. But, manual labour, Tony. When you look at some of these guys, and my entire family all worked in the pits, simple as that. You can trace my family right back to coming over from Ireland, and it was all pit workers. There was certainly no money in my family right down the line. And but the manual labour was hard enough. Yeah.
But the working conditions and the environment and the hours were horrendous. And what got them through it was the camaraderie of their workmates. And that's where you get the patter and the humour, isn't it?
Of course, and that's where the team ethos comes from.
Mhm.
You're part of a team, and you talk to people about things like that, the daily drudgery, the hardship, and in some cases poverty as well. A lot of cases, and this is recent history. This is not something from a bygone age, and it's hard to communicate that, isn't it? My father grew up in Pollock, and he didn't have a lot, but he worked hard all his life. He was in the same job for 44, 45 years, and he nurtured that family spirit, and I'm lucky to still have my parents, and and every now and again he'll talk to me about his childhood, and I just can't comprehend a lot of the things he says. My mother will talk to me about her childhood growing up in Castlemilk, and I unfortunately lost my gran in 1983, but for those few years that I remember, going to the flat in Castlemilk every weekend. You know, they're joyous to me. You know, and all of them linked with Celtic, because I was allowed to stay up late to watch Celtic. You know, after Starsky and Hutch when it was on the BBC, and then on a Sunday I would interrupt the High Chaparral because Scott Sport was coming on and cause absolute mayhem and uproar in my grand's flat, but I wouldn't care. I had to see Celtic, you know, and even better if it was a game where they'd beaten Rangers and you were getting those highlights and stuff, you know, and you know, but that whole working class upbringing, you know, where you had like kitchen, a living room, a toilet, one stroke, maybe 2 bedrooms, that kind of thing, you know, and life was hard and it was tough. Football was that light at the end of the tunnel. It was, you see, that release, and it gave working class people so much joy, just to get that release, and to, you see, the actual rituals that were involved. You know, you met your pals, or your family, you went to the pub, you went to the game.
Somebody's driving, get a vehicle, that whole thing.
You went in a bus. It was ritualistic, it was tribalistic. You know, you sang
and then songs. The songs, you think about ritualistic, tribalistic, you think about community, you think about the singing of songs within communities. You go to the chapel and sing the songs. I remember during the miners' strike, the songs, that's what I remember during, you know.
And all through it, what goes through your mind? Dreams and songs to sing.
Yeah.
Right? That's, you know, that's carved in every Celtic supporter's heart. Dreams and songs to sing, new dreams, new songs. You know, just they are the eternal optimists, romantics. You know, you think the best of situations, you think the best of people, because that's just the way you are. You do unto others, all that kind of ethos that's in you. You know, something like this. You're going to raise funds for the Celtic's birthplace. Yeah, let's do it. Because it's in you, it's in your DNA. It doesn't have to be explained, if you get what I mean. Because you know that, you know, you have grown up feeling like that. That's the way you are as a Celtic supporter. I would go as far as say you're a charitable person by nature, because you see you've had it from growing up, and if you're religious, going into chapel, singing your songs, have your dreams, but that charitable element to that as well, raising funds, doing whatever, you know. And so it's. I kind of think that it's a kind of byproduct of being a Celtic supporter, that you're like that. That's why you speak to a lot of Celtic supporters, and they have charitable issues close to their heart. You mentioned a few of them: mental health. You know, making sure kids have a toy at Christmas, homelessness, which is my big one. You know, and then you touched upon food banks. These are things we're talking about in 2021.
Yep.
All these things were prevalent in 1887. More prevalent in 1887.
Poverty, Tony. Right, poverty.
Yeah, right. You could actually be talking about 1887 in the present day. And the more things change, the more they stay the same, as they say. And that's what gets to me. And I think that's what gets to a lot of people, that, you know, we're doing something.
You want to be a force for change. You want to be a force for positivity. I mean, the very foundation, to use that word, which is ironic, the very foundation of Celtic was due to the fact that 40 years after the Irish diaspora came over during the famine time, things hadn't got better for them. They were oppressed, you know, and through prejudice within this country, you know, we faced an issue of no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. That was the attitude still prevalent 40 years after the Great Hunger. We're not talking about 40 years, Tony. The poverty still exists.
Yeah.
That what we're talking about. The poverty where we had to furnish the dinner tables of the 3 parishes at that time in 1887. That poverty still exists. There's kids going to bed hungry in 2021, going on 2022. And the very fact that you were talking about romanticism, I already had a comment up from Cormac Ryan, up the dubs indeed. If you can't have romance in football, what's the point? There's a man after Kevin Graham's heart.
And my own heart. Football, I've always said, it's for the romantics, it's for the dreamers.
football's a game of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Always will be.
Dreams and songs to sing, Tony.
It's you don't have dreams in football, as Cormac says. Then there's no point.
You're right. Why does, asks Danny Boy 68, a chapel need money? See, I think it's important to bring this up. Does the Vatican not look after it? I think prior to this week, I always had an understanding of the fact, and I spoke to you this morning about this, Tony. I was an altar boy at Sacred Heart Pennycook, and I always knew, getting that wee glimpse behind the curtain, as it were, that these people didn't have much in the way of luxuries. I'm talking about priests. They didn't. I always felt that, they were basically, they were on a mission. This was a vacation. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about possessions. It wasn't about materialistic things. And they had very little in terms of that. And I realised that much back then when I was a kid. But to realise this week or last week that, the living quarters of a priest down at St. Mary's are so cold that you can almost see the cold air coming out your mouth when you're in their kitchen. That shows that, why does it need money? Because it isn't being financed. It's not. What happens is the chapel require certain things to be done, let's say repairs, immediate repairs, to ensure that the masses can go ahead, let's say. They need to pay that money back, which means they're in debt. They're in debt. And what happens is we get into scenarios where priests are so dedicated to it that they go without. They actually go without, Tony. And that's what's happened here. So thanks for raising that, Danny. I think that was maybe my view a few weeks ago. But having spoken to Canon Tom down at St. Mary's, I know that's certainly not the case. They don't get the bailout. They don't get the bailout, Tony. But I think I'm going to bring this right up to date by telling you that we have now raised, we collectively, not ACSOM, we as a community of Celtic fans have raised £16,545. Now that is after one day. It's without the auction. We've got an auction that we're going to start running as well tomorrow. And we're going to push it on the social media channels, and we're going to push it on ACSOM all week, Tony. There's about 30 items, maybe more, that we're going to be auctioning off. Loads of great signed goods. So it looks at this time, and I'm not counting any chickens, that we might be up in the regions of about £20,000 for St. Mary's. Astonishing achievement by everybody involved. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved throughout the day. If at any point I look as though I'm looking at my phone, it's because I'm setting up the next stream. But I'll do it when Tony's on a roll, when he's explaining something. Please, what do you want to ask us? Ask us some questions. I've got loads of stuff here I want to talk about, but I want to throw it out. I want to throw it out to you guys and girls that are commenting. Please ask us anything you want about ACSOM, about Celtic, about music, anything you want, and we will certainly do our utmost to answer the questions. I've got to say, I don't really get involved in any twos and fro's, Tony, with any imposters on the comments field. I don't tend to do that. But anybody who's spending their Saturday night coming on a charity stream to try and troll Celtic in the support, come on, man. Yeah, it's beyond words. Come on, we're raising cash here, and people that are coming on, just call them out in the comment section. We'll get them blocked because there is something missing in your lives. Really, there really is something missing there, Tony. And by the way, I'm not tarring everybody with the same brush. We've had loads of people who consistently come into the comment section who don't support Celtic, and they're civil, and they come in and they make great points, and we can engage with them, and it's absolutely fine.
I welcome that part of the comment section at ACSOM, and some of the nicest DMs I've had are from supporters of other football clubs who have took their time out to get in touch and say they liked something you said or they agreed with something, and and if they don't support Celtic, that I think that's a wonderful thing, that they clearly love football, which yourself and myself do, and it doesn't matter. I've said before, the colour of your scarf or jersey is irrelevant. You want to engage and talk football, we'll do that all day. I'm like yourself, I don't choose to engage with trolls. I think it's a waste of
human emotion, and it's something that you don't need in your life. But I'll willingly engage with anybody who wants to talk football and who wants to talk about their particular support for a particular club, because I love football. Yeah, I'm a Celtic supporter. That's fair enough. I've never ever had that. But I'm also a football supporter, and I can speak about lots of other football-related topics other than Celtic. Just so happens that Celtic's my team of choice, but I can engage with anyone, as you say, if they're civil, because I'll respect them if they respect me.
Absolutely. Some of these comments are tremendous, Tony, that are coming in. So that's us covered the trolling ones. Let's have a look at some of the positive ones. I'm just going to read them out because a lot of them are not questions, but I'm going to bring them up anyway. Owen McGrandles, Bullseye, then Scotsport. I mean, just with those three words, you are taking us back, Owen, to a time, a more innocent time. Let's be honest, Tony.
But everybody looks back on a time growing up with the green tinted glasses, I suppose, because people say that's what I have, or rose tinted glasses. But, I was talking about with Scotsport a Saturday night after Starsky and Hutch, that kind of thing, people can immediately transport themselves back to that. I watched that in my grand's flat, watched the 1980 Scottish Cup final in my grand's flat, and got worried that my father was caught up in the aftermath, the Hampden riot, and it really did affect me. And until he walked through the door, I was really upset as a kid. I'd be 7, 8 years old. I remember my dad leaving my grand's flat to go to the 4-2 10-men won the league game. Mm-hmm. And it's the one and only time I've gripped onto his leg as he was going down the stairs, and I was squealing blue murder to go. But because I was 6, 7, he didn't take me because he felt I'd be too young for a game of that magnitude. And it's only in hindsight later on, as the years went on, he said he wishes I'd been there to experience the 10 men won the league game, because it's up there in his top 3 of Celtic games ever, and as I was saying earlier, he presses a Polaroid in his mind and he'll tell me all about that night. There was no footage of it, there was a TV strike, there's that kind of footage that Celtic show now and again, but where the lens cap was left on and it's grainy and it's, and it's only if you were there can you get the kind of excitement and the passion and the old jungle, and that's in my list of games I wish I'd been at.
What's your memories of the jungle?
Memories of the jungle, what? You know what? I graduated from the main stand to number 2 in the old Celtic end, and then my pals would go on the Celtic supporters bus, the Kilbride bus that left from East Kilbride, and that way I get that paranoid that my father could see me from number 2 in the Celtic end, and so every time I went into the jungle I would try and hide, and my pals are like, if your dad can spot you in the jungle from number 2 in the Celtic end, he's a whiz. And that's how paranoid I got about it all. But the jungle was just, it's become a mythical place now, hasn't it?
It has.
Everybody is a tale of the jungle, and
remember the book Jungle Tales?
Yeah, and just fond memories of that. The TV gantry was above it, wasn't it? And
yep.
Many a journalist like myself now get ritually slaughtered doing that kind of TFI Friday walk across the gantry, and guys like Archie McPherson, Jock Brown and Arthur Montford, they got dogs abuse, and it was an unforgiving place, but it was there was the wow factor to the jungle, wasn't it? Because that's where real men went to watch their football. That's real men supported football. The guys that could go, as you say, on the bus and drink for Scotland. Just the alcohol consumption was frightening. But you kind of, as a kid, you sort of admired it, probably for all the wrong reasons, but you just thought, these are real guys who did 12-hour shifts, straight on to a supporters bus. And
could hold court, were brilliant raconteurs, were great comedians, funny men. And from a very young age, I was always in adult company. And I loved it. I was just my ears were open. So I like to think that I learned a lot. I took a lot in. I was a sponge. I just kind of absorbed a lot. And guys would say things and you wouldn't understand, but in your mind it was funny, so you would laugh. But you'd be telling jokes that, you didn't get the punchline, but it didn't matter. You just thought, this guy looks funny, he speaks funny, or he tells a tale funny, that kind of thing. So my life was always surrounded by these kind of guys, because my dad ran a highly successful amateur football team. To me, my dad was the greatest manager in the world. My dad was up there with Clough and Steen and Shankly, because I'd hear him in the dressing room talking to these guys and moulding that team. And you talk about Brendan Rodgers' Invincibles. I watched my dad's team for 10 years, and I could count on the one hand the amount of times they lost. Well, they were just a brilliant amateur football team, and they all came from Brigton, Kilmarnock area, Glasgow. And they were all Celtic or Rangers supporters. And my dad never entertained any kind of nonsense. Their motto was commitment. So you talk about commitment to a cause. And I was in a dressing room, I would be 7, 8, 9, and these guys would be like 19, 20, 21. My dad would be, I don't know, I can't remember how many. Well, my dad's 23 years older than me, so my dad would be in his early 30s, and my dad was holding court and he was giving these speeches which are chilling in your mind, and telling people, and they were beating all and sundry, and to me that was just a fascinating world, right? And when they were not playing on a Saturday, we would go and watch Celtic, but so I was immersed in football from a very early age, and I was in a dressing room as well, and so you got that humour from real men, as I called them. I was just a wee guy, so these were real men, and you got the humour, and you got an idea of what it was like to work all week and then have that release as a footballer, as a player or a spectator or whatever, and it's a brilliant grounding for me in terms of my love affair with football.
What I think is incredible is we talk about a bygone day of the jungle, and I've spoken again about my memories of the jungle. I always remember the first time my dad took me in. It was a New Year's Day game when Rangers beat us 3-1 and Tony Mowbray scored a header, and it was bucketing with rain that day. So much so that by the time we got in the stadium, we were drenched through. Your woolen scarf was about 3 stone in weight around your neck. I remember going like that, throwing it around my neck, and it hit somebody right off the face. Cheers, wee man, one of them. And it was like, once we went into the jungle, it was the body heat.
Yeah.
But it was also the fact that everybody very slowly is drying out, and it was that smell as well. Everybody with their damp clothes and the rain and all that, and then the stench of the drink, and that undeniable smell of urine as well that used to make its way down the front. But I mean, we are romantics because it was vile, man. It was vile, but we look back fondly on it.
Of course, I remember being in the jungle, and I think it was the centenary team. Sure it was, and whoever, and I think Chris Morris failed to find Joe Miller with a pass, and I've just let rip, and I went, "Oh, Chris, give it to Joe Miller. He'd hundreds of space, man, right?" And some guy just went like that to me, looked to the side and went, "Space, man," and all around him just creased herself laughing, and then he was like, "Who's the space man?" And sheepishly I was like, "It's me." And the guy was like, and so it was your turn to get a ribbon for just shouting something so stupid, right? But I loved all that. I was just like, great, that you felt accepted then. If you were the butt of jokes, it was like, right, okay, fine, it would be somebody else's turn next. Or if one of your pals tried to start a song and like it was only him that was singing, and then the next thing you get solo. So and you get mortified, you go all red and stuff like that. So stuff like that was brilliant, and the jungle was full of guys like that. Saturday Sannies, as my dad would call them. you didn't know where they went during the week, but they would just appear in the jungle and they would hold court and they were brilliant, and you lapped it up. You couldn't get enough of these guys, and they just seemed to be a font of knowledge. Probably absolute nonsense and gibberish they were talking.
But they pulled it off
Celtic.
with aplomb and confidence.
There was that Glasgow gallousness that Bertie Auld spoke about.
That's
right?
exactly who came to my mind when you were telling me that.
Bertie, that kind of, who can they play, and then let's sing the Celtic song. I heard that. Guys like that, and you would always know them because they were the ones whose pals were hanging on to their every word, would laugh when they were meant to laugh. Short of standing there holding cue cards, applause, gentlemen, laugh now. And guys like that fascinated me always, because you could always pick them out.
But that humour ended up on stages, Tony.
Yeah.
The comedians.
This kind of precursor to... Billy Connolly speaks about these guys all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The guys that were funny in the shipyards. These guys who knew tough times, but had that gallows humour. And at the football on a Saturday, they were the main man. Their pals respected them. They looked up to them. My dad used to say, that shop steward's finest hour. Power to the people, strike lads, that kind of stuff. And I'll lead you. Trust me. Your life and trust's in my hands. That kind of stuff. Football was full of those guys. Really brilliant orators, joke tellers, storytellers. Guys with real knowledge and wisdom. And see, when people like that came along, I just tend to listen.
Well, I've been listening to you, Tony, so I think you've got a wee bit of that yourself.
I wouldn't go that far.
It's
Norman
made its
wisdom,
way.
I think I've got.
It made its way. And one last thing before we go and wrap this show up, because waiting in the wings is the unrestricted view, and they will be taking over for the last hour. I just want to thank everybody again for taking us up to 16,910 quid. We're £90 off 17 grand. That's unbelievable.
That's
honestly incredible. I'm not just saying any of this. One last thing to think about. So I remember listening to an interview on a very early Celtic podcast that was called Desert Island Tims. You can imagine the premise. Brilliant show. Love it. I absolutely loved that show. And there was a gentleman called Tom Minogue, who's from Fife, and he was the guest on Desert. And he spoke, Tony, about a time when the first time you seen those green and white hoops in Technicolor was when you went to the game. Just let that sink in. That's incredible. We've got everything at our fingertips. Every second of the day, you had to go to the game to see the resplendent white and green on the Celtic jersey. Absolutely, I love that from Tom Minogue. And I wonder if Desert Island Tims is still out there, because I loved that podcast. I want to thank everybody. You've made this a success. We're almost at 17 grand. Let's see if we can push through 17, and we'll be back tomorrow on a Celtic State of Mind. Thank you, Tony Haggerty.